Hi, I've been asked to share a little bit of my journey of how I've come to know God in my life. I grew up in a Church of Scotland family in Polmont, and I went along to Sunday school every week during my primary school years. But as I got into high school, I fell away from church a little bit. I didn't go along to Bible class, so although on some Sunday mornings I went to church with my mum and my gran. But when I was 13, one of my friends asked me to help with Sunday school, which I really enjoyed. So I would say I had a connection with church, but I guess not a strong connection with God. When I was in fourth year at high school, one of my friends went to Denny Baptist Church, and she started inviting me along to some of our youth group events. And so I went along to those, and I enjoyed them to an extent. But I do remember feeling judged if I didn't say have good Bible knowledge, and I guess I always felt a little bit awkward and not quite worthy enough. And looking back on those years, I know I always believed in God, but I didn't really know Him. And from the experiences I'd had, I developed a flawed understanding of what being a Christian was. I thought it was all about having good Bible knowledge and doing good things. So in my fifth year at high school, our new minister started up a youth fellowship, and that was a real turning point for me. As I started to learn and experience more of who God was and to build Christ-based friendships. And I guess I continued on that same trajectory with God as I went to university. I started work, I married Ewan, and we moved to Cooper. And I would say my faith was important to me during that time and during those years, and I do recall knowing the presence of God more and more. However, I would say I still had this overriding fear that I wasn't worthy enough to get to heaven, and how could I be sure I'd get there? So after we'd moved to Cooper, we started going along to this really amazing church, which was so full of people who just love Christ. And we were welcomed immediately into the church. We were asked to go along to a house group and then to do an Alpha course. I remember sitting in our discussion group after having watched one of those Nicky Gumbel videos. I think it was Why Did Jesus Die for Me? And I had made a comment that I was worried I hadn't done enough to get into heaven. And it was at that point that I realised, I suddenly grasped what Jesus had done for me. The fact that He had taken all my sins, He died, and He rose again. And by doing that, He'd made me worthy in the eyes of our Father. And I would say it was really at that point that I truly understood what it meant to become a Christian. Reflecting back on how God has been working in my life, I see a few key themes. Firstly, I know that God definitely speaks to me through the people that He brings into my life. I could share numerous times when friends or people I guess I've just come to know have led me closer to God, whether it's been coming alongside me in prayer, whether it's been inviting me to Christian conferences, giving me an encouraging word, or challenging me to give a talk or to lead an Alpha group. And they've appeared at just the right moment in my life to journey alongside me, to speak into the situation that I've been in, and to help me deepen my knowledge and relationship with God. I still have a long way to go to mature in my faith, but I am so thankful that I know God as my Father. And secondly, God has always met me where I am. In the times when I've maybe felt fearful or lost or distant, God has been so faithful, drawn close to me when I've called on Him. I've had a real sense of Him calling me my child. And God's not left me where He's met me. He's challenged me to push my boundaries, step out my comfort zone. And it hasn't always been easy, but it's amazing what I've certainly found is that any steps that I have taken have been so worth it as I've come to discover more of His love and His presence. A couple of years ago, I had quite a tough time. Life hadn't worked out as Ewan and I had hoped it would, and I had, I think, what I would call a few wilderness years where I guess I stopped dreaming and hoping and just burying away hurts and disappointments. But God was with me through all of this. In His mercy, He helped me rediscover my identity in Him, the hope that I can have for the future, and the courage and peace that the Holy Spirit brings. And I find Isaiah 43:19 really speaks into this situation for me. For I am about to do something new. See, I have already begun. Do you not see it? I will make a pathway through the wilderness. I will create rivers in the dry wasteland. So if I was to summarise what knowing God means for me, I would say it's like coming home. It's about having that peace that His presence brings that nothing else can come close to. It was a bit like the time we found this little inner city church when we were on holiday in New Orleans. The night before, we'd inadvertently stumbled across, I think, what's the party street in New Orleans. On the face of it, it looks like this wild, crazy party. Everybody's having this amazing fun. But underneath, when you see these people, they're so full of, they're so lost and kind of so lacking in hope. And I remember feeling tired and quite emotional. And that night, I'd go into my bed in tears thinking, this is so not the place that I want to be. But the next morning, we'd come across this little church, this amazing, unassuming little church. And it was somewhere that welcomed those on the street, those who others would pass by, who others would turn away. But this was somewhere that welcomed them as they were. And as I remember going into that church and taking my seat and starting to worship with everyone, I just knew I was home, recalling the words of my father, my child.